Hello and good morning. I'm Brian Gregory, Policy Director of the Alliance of British Drivers. Accompanying me is our Communications Director, Paul Naylor.
Good morning.
Welcome to Unprecedented TV and Full Throttle, presented by us, the Alliance of British Drivers. Today, we're going to dive into our news digest, which is a bi-weekly document I produce on germane issues to motoring, politics, science, all sorts of things. I've got to warn you, it's a bumper issue. It runs to about 13 pages of references, and we'll try and pick out the most important ones and try to keep it down to a reasonable time so you haven't all fallen asleep by the end of the podcast. So without any more ado, let's dig in.
Let's go for it, Brian. So
okay,
the news digest. What's really hitting you at the moment on this news digest?
Well, it is and it isn't. The big thing is that the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Control, uses what it calls scenarios to describe future carbon dioxide concentration pathways or scenarios. And the one that's been used by almost all governments and scientists until very recently is something called RCP 8.5, which is representative concentration pathway 8.5. And it was described by IPCC and its acolytes as business as usual. But it wasn't. It was describing a scenario where all of the UK, all of the world industry was using coal at levels that were completely ridiculous, even taking into account the huge growth in coal use in China, India, and other places for power generation.
Yeah,
this pathway was never in the slightest plausible, but the IPCC has for 20 years been peddling this RCP 8.5 to politicians and civil servants and whatnot globally. And it's been used to formulate loads of policies. And now the IPCC has admitted that RCP 8.5 is implausible and has binned it. So all of the assumptions for climate policy and concentrations of carbon dioxide, all those sort of things that were dependent on this scenario are basically junk and should never have been used for policy formulation. So, but then, and the downstream effects of that are enormous, because the climate models that they use based on what they anticipate the carbon dioxide levels to be are already completely wrong. We've seen this. We've seen the Christie model, where basically he showed all of the concentration pathways, their effect on carbon dioxide going forward, predicted, showed the average, which is, that is not as extreme as RCP 8.5. RCP 8.5 is even worse than that. And then you look at the actual measurements from balloons and from satellites, and they go like that. So, we have a policy suite that is based on an implausible scenario that doesn't even slightly resemble reality. And then where policies are being formulated around junk science.
So what are your hopes? What are your hopes for this?
Well, it's gradually started to trickle down through the media. At first, it was like nothing had happened, but the media is starting to pick up now. And more of the people who are realists about climate understand it's a multifaceted issue, and carbon dioxide is only a tiny factor in it. And there are many more other factors: solar activity, solar inertia, Milankovitch cycles, ocean currents, You know, and the IPCC ignores all those and only concentrates on one thing, carbon dioxide, which is why their scenarios are junk. You know, you look at the predictions from the scenarios and they don't resemble reality. Well, if the models don't resemble reality, then the models are wrong.
Yeah.
There's no two way about it. All they try and do is fudge the models so that they get closer to reality instead of starting from ground zero and said, well, the model's wrong, we'll have to design a new one.
Yeah.
That works.
Do you think from a political standpoint, for them to sort of, inverted commas, save face, that they will sort of try and find some way around justifying their next stage?
Oh, absolutely, because certainly, and getting politicians, I think all politicians have a deep sort of Japanese streak in them. Being made to look a fool is even if they are fools, is not something politicians like to do. And so they will take all possible measures to save face and minimize the implications of this. But ultimately, the IPCC house of cards is going to come tumbling down at some point, and the politicians need to be distancing themselves from ground zero when it collapses.
Yeah. So the sort of people we're thinking of here, like your Ed Miliband's of this world.
Yeah, absolutely,
really,
because they'll be the ones in the firing line when all of this lot collapses around their ears. The ones still standing and peddling this, climate crisis scenario are the ones who are going to get buried in the rubble. Yeah.
I mean, I've just come back from Spain, and obviously a far sunnier. I mean, I know we've had some quite nice weather lately here, but normally a far sunnier, far brighter place. And there was a large building that I walked past that was sort of sunken into the ground, if you like, so you have to go down steps to it, and all across the roof of it, solar panels. It makes perfect sense in that scenario to have solar panels, but solar energy in this country is never going to be a practical solution. I don't think it shouldn't be a choice. I think if people want to have solar panels, it's like so many things we talk about, Brian. Choice is the key word. People should have the choice to have an EV if they want one, but it shouldn't be mandatory. And this whole net zero target that has been dreamt up by government and become policy, nobody has ever voted a government in on that basis.
No, our friend Tony Blair, when he was Prime Minister, he was the one who laid the grounds for the net zero legislation. I mean, we had a discussion about this with Catherine McBride yesterday. In our last podcast. So he ultimately, him and his mate, the Prince of Darkness, were involved in laying the groundwork for all this madness.
But I think because that was the foothills of all this nonsense, I think there was sort of like a lot of sort of tongue-in-cheek reception for it from the general public. It was like, okay, whatever, let them talk about it.
But of course, all this was going on in the background. It wasn't affecting anybody. Nobody's lifestyle was being affected. It was just all conceptual stuff.
Exactly.
The problem is, once they got beyond the concepts, then they started to implement it, and now people's lives are being affected, and they realize just how expensive net zero is. I mean, I think one of the estimates we did said it was going to cost about $500 billion a year, right, for 25 years or whatever it was when we looked at it. It's probably 24 or whatever now to get to 2050. But that's a huge amount of money. You're talking about, when we first started, it was sort of something of the order of 15 trillion pounds. Well, the GDP of the UK is like 3 trillion. So you're looking at 5 years GDP, albeit spread over 30 years. Well, that's like a sixth of your GDP is being wasted on net zero measures that are not actually delivering anything except economic destruction.
Well, it's also a way of keeping the man on the street under your thumb as well, isn't it? Because
absolutely,
nobody's ever going to prosper.
No, that's right. Yeah, and of course, until we get hold of these green idiots and basically get them out of the political process by whatever means necessary, we're going to be saddled, because they're always going to be, I think we should issue them the old sandwich boards, the end of the world is nigh. And actually, we could employ them doing that. We should stand them on street corners with these sandwich boards and let them spout their stuff. And then everybody can pelt them with tomatoes or whatever. Because, they're all completely, doolally, away with the mixer, as one of my late uncles used to say. They will keep spouting this stupid zealotry that has no sound foundation in science, as long as we let them.
Yeah.
But basically, we should let them, but we should just ridicule them and laugh at them because that's all they deserve.
Exactly.
Certainly, we shouldn't let them anywhere near policy making.
No, unfortunately, we live in a world where everything's been flipped on its head, where the minority have now very much got the box to stand on, and we're having to listen to, and anybody that's got any common sense about them that is, again, in inverted commas, normal.
Well, these three, what is it? Diversity, equality, and inclusion.
Yeah,
and each of them means the opposite.
Yeah.
Diversity actually means you will have one worldview, and we will tell you what it is.
Yeah.
Equality means that people who don't fit in with this approach are going to be marginalized, and inclusion is the same. We will keep you out of the political process if you don't agree with us. So the whole thing is completely perverse, and means the exact opposite of what what's written on the tin.
The thing is as well, I think sadly it's a trend. It's it's self-flagellation has become popular.
Well, I think it always was among certain portion of the population, but that's moving swiftly on.
And next,
What was I going to say about that? This thing about marginalizing people and whatnot. It's it's just completely unreasonable and unethical. But it's just happening, and there was one of the references we've got actually is a guy who's I'm just looking for it now. Here it is. It's in the digest. It's item 54. As a Soviet historian who has spent years writing about the extreme repressive controls Soviet communism exercised over its unfortunate citizens, I find it really hard to bring a similar accusation against. I find it really hard not to bring a similar accusation against the Labour government and Keir Starmer. We have no gulag or death penalty, admittedly, but what Labour and the old Soviet regime do have in common is the arrogant belief that they alone hold the moral high ground, and that this entitles them to the total control over all those who do not share their worldview. Like the Soviets of old, their tools of control are the same. And certainly, Starmer keeps talking about the far right. Well, actually, the Overton window is not left and right anymore. The Overton window is libertarian, totalitarian, and he is right at the far end of the totalitarian approach. So anybody he describes as far right is actually right so far and libertarian.
Quite right.
Somebody needs to point that out to him.
Yeah, all this far right stuff really great, isn't it?
Well, especially with people who are actually middle of the road centrists and have watched policy get more and more illiberal and totalitarian while they sat in one place. And then to be pilloried as being far right for actually standing up for common sense and integrity and honesty and fairness, great, very much.
Absolutely. You label something as far right and you're just basically trying to shut people down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If you can't invite opinion and criticism, well then, you've got no room at my table.
But I mean, the whole far left, far right thing is a synthetic distinction anyway. Because if you lived under Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia, as a citizen, it was much the same. It was repressive. You could be grabbed by the secret police, strung up on piano wire or whatever, or disappeared off to some concentration camp or gulag and never be seen again.
Yeah.
So they are identical. And I think it's Ayn Rand, an American female sociologist, who said there's no difference between fascism and communism. They're two gangs fighting over a rival territory. So, basically, two brands of ideological excrement, just a different label on the bucket.
Very well said.
Yes. Anyway, sorry, we divert. The problem is this digest's got so much in it. It's really hard to focus on anything in particular. All this hysteria around the recent warm weather. You know, you've got all these. As I was saying before, if it means temperatures are rising, then it's global climate change. But if they're falling or they're a bit inclement, then that's just weather.
Yeah.
No, that's not how the climate works.
Yeah.
You know, we sometimes get some nice warm weather, and other times we get nasty, pretty cold weather. And in the current, what they're describing as a heat dome that's over us, over Central Europe and the UK. It's just a large static high pressure system.
Yeah.
The east of Europe's getting unseasonably cold weather, but nobody's pointing that out. Nobody seems to be able to look at the weather map that goes further into the Soviet Union and places like that, where they're actually getting very cold temperatures at the same time as we're getting hot ones.
Yeah. Well, I can remember a few years back, probably a decade ago, when we had a run of warm weather like we've just had, which is sadly, I think, comes to an end today.
Yeah.
But when we've had a run of weather like that, you get the same sort of shots on the news, kiddies on the beach eating a nice lolly or whatever, making a sandcastle, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it would just be commented on as, isn't it great? Isn't it lovely weather? Sadly, this is all going to come to an end in 2 days' time, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. These days, we got climate experts. We're doomed. Yeah. Just enjoy it. How often do we get it? Just enjoy it while we get it. You know?
Well, exactly. But I mean, it's just laughable now. And the other thing I keep pointing out, my wife doesn't really notice it, but you look at the temperature graphs now and compare them with 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, if it was 28 degrees, it would still be in green. Now it's in black, you know, and dark red and stuff like that. But 28 degrees is pleasantly, it's getting a bit on the warm side, but it's pleasant,
nice.
You know.
Lovely. Yeah.
And you know, if it's 35, okay, then that's pretty damn hot for us.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, in Saudi, where 35 is, you know, okay, time to retire to the air-conditioned office or car or whatever, you know. But it's not the end of the world, and it's certainly not catastrophic. I mean, if say we're at 35, it means that other places further north, you know, which like Alaska and places like that, which seldom get above about 20 degrees, that's great for them. That means their growing window is longer, so they can cultivate more food, and it means it's a pleasanter place to live.
Yeah.
You know, so if because the way that the climate works, if the planet's getting warmer, then the heat, the temperature warms from the equator, because at the equator the radiation is coming down virtually normal to the ground. It can't actually get any hotter. But if the planet's getting warmer, then it warms from the equator towards the poles, and that reduces the differential in temperature between the polar regions and the equator, and that reduces the amount of extreme weather. So that's actually good. When the reverse happens, and the planet cools, it cools from the poles towards the equator. The equator is the last place to get frozen over. If it's going to happen, if we're in an ice age, the poles is wherever all civilization in previous eras, as all animal life has migrated to avoid being frozen to death. So, you know, the system's self-regulating insofar as the Earth's unable to self-regulate, because the sun's the controlling external factor. And to say, oh, you know, we're having extreme weather, it means the climate's collapsing. No, it means the climate's just doing what it's always done. It alters due to the fact that we get an altering amount of radiation, solar irradiance from the sun, due to factors like its nearness to us, or how far away it is, other cosmic ray incidents and things like that. The whole slew of factors that affect how much radiation the Earth absorbs. And the Earth's sitting in interplanetary space, which is at minus 270 Celsius, roughly, just 3 degrees above absolute, 3 Kelvin above absolute zero. So if we get any excess incoming solar irradiance, incoming energy, it's wicked out again to space, because that's the way thermodynamics works. So we might get a slightly higher stability point where the heat coming in or the radiant energy coming in matches the energy going out, but there's no tipping point.
No. Isn't it also the case, Brian, that we are still emerging from the last ice age? So the planet is warming anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, what people don't seem to understand is over geological time, the planet is either warming or it's cooling.
Yeah.
And you don't want it to be cooling.
No.
Because when the planet cools, it's really bad news for animal life.
Exactly.
You get, mass extinctions of, species even, because the planet's freezing and it can't support life. And as I mentioned, we're in the Goldilocks zone, as it's called. We're in that region of space. We're far enough from the sun that we don't get crisped, but we're not so far that we don't ever get liquid water freezing permanently. Well, in ice ages that starts to happen, but normally water can exist on this planet in all of its states. Solid, liquid, vapor, in different regions on the earth at different times because of our climate, day and night, and seasons and stuff like that. And that's why it's a place where life, carbon-based life like us can survive.
So do you think, I mean, realistically, they should be making more of a point of this, shouldn't they? That the fact that we are on the increase from the previous ice age.
Yeah.
So you can't compare temperatures today to 100 years ago, for example, because they will invariably be lower because they were lower down on the recovery.
Well, yeah, and there's confounding factors to that, because now in many cases they don't use the old mercury thermometers, they use temperature probes, and those automatically introduce a bias because they overread by about half a degree compared with the old mercury thermometers.
Yeah.
Right. So the probes that they're using actually make the apparent warming worse because they read a higher value at the same temperature. They haven't calibrated the damn things properly. So that introduces a factor. But the where was I going with that? But yes, you're right. I mean, there's a really good video, and you've got to go searching for it. It's by a guy called Jürgen Peder Steffensen, I think he's called. And basically the video is called "We Live in Cold Times," and you can search for it. In fact, what I'll do is I'll find the reference and we can attach it to the broadcast. And basically, Pedersen's a Danish climate scientist and works at one of these places where they bore ice cores down into the.
You showed me this. It's very interesting. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. And basically, what Pedersen says is, when we started measuring temperatures using mercury thermometers at the beginning of the industrial age, the 1700s, right? That was actually one of the coldest periods in the last 10,000 years.
Yeah.
And we started measuring temperature from there, and it's very, very hard to differentiate between natural effects of warming because we were at the bottom of the temperature scale that the Earth normally experiences, and the fact that we were industrializing and increasing atmospheric carbon dioxide and all the other climate factors, and they're all intertwined. And it's really hard to decide, well, is this effect due to natural variation? How much is human influence? And there are loads of estimates varying from, cataclysmic human influence to 9/10 of NAF all. And I'm mostly with the guys like Richard Lindzen and William Happer and all of these Nobel Prize winning physicists who said it's actually 9/10 of NAF all. Yeah. There's a really interesting paper by William Happer and William Weingarten, another climate scientist, where they actually painstakingly constructed the absorption spectrum of all of the gases on the planet across the entire infrared spectrum by taking each gas and each line in the spectrum and the concentration and lumping all the effects together. And they built a climate model, and the climate model matches how the temperature varies at the pole, at the equator and in mid-latitudes. So it's a really good climate model, unlike the junk ones we've discussed before with the IPCC.
Yeah.
And what they did was they said, right, this is the existing climate model, and it literally maps exactly to the physically measured absorption spectrum that you can pick up from satellite measurements. Okay. And they said, well, let's take this, but what we'll do is we'll double the level of carbon dioxide compared to where it is now. Okay, so currently it's about 400 parts per million, about 0.04%. So they doubled the concentration in their model to 800 parts per million, and looked at the difference. And the difference was less than 1%. It was about 3 watts per square meter. It was a tiny difference. So it doesn't really matter how much more carbon dioxide we emit, and we only emit 3.5% of the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere. The rest natural, we can't control. So, you know, all this people sort of tearing their hair out and worrying about how much carbon dioxide there is in the atmosphere are actually, their worries are misplaced. Well, and the other point is, when you look at commercial greenhouses, they pump about 1,200 parts per million of carbon dioxide into them to improve plant growth.
I was just going to say, a couple of months back, we had a tree expert, Mark Chester, on our show. And I think we were probably both expecting him to be very against carbon dioxide. Nothing of the sort. I mean, it's the stuff of life.
Absolutely. Anybody who remembers the old Star Trek Voyager, the film? There was the Persis Kambata, I think it was, the actress who played this android that had been sent to, well, either help, I can't remember now, whether she was helping humanity or trying to destroy us. But anyway, she kept that we were described as carbon-based life forms. Well, we are basically. We are based on water, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, you know, a slew of other elements, iron and, you know, zinc and various other things at very, very low concentrations. But primarily, if you desiccate us, water and carbon dioxide are the main things that make up our bodies. So to think that carbon dioxide, which is a gas that we all breathe in at 0.04%, and we breathe out, I think it's at 4%. So our exhaled carbon dioxide is like 100 times more concentrated than the air we breathe in. Okay. To think that our ecosystem is not able to accommodate those kind of differences is, frankly, it's the height of hubris and arrogance. This planet is a giant carbon dioxide recycling machine, and we're just part of the recycling process.
I mean, why else would there be uproar when we lose huge swathes of like the rainforest? You know.
I mean, they're an enormous sink of carbon dioxide, and also, of course, when trees die and whatnot, they also enormous source of carbon dioxide, and even within that, the biggest natural sources of carbon dioxide are things like termites, apparently a huge source of carbon dioxide. Phytoplankton in the oceans, they also emit huge amounts of carbon dioxide. But of course, it's in the oceans, and it permeates out very, very gradually. It's very difficult to pick up where it's coming out, because it's coming out everywhere across all the oceans. And we can't control any of that.
No, for whatever reason, the message that's getting out and has established itself, unfortunately, is incorrect, to say the least, but also very dangerous, because we're now basing modern life on a lie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can trace this actually back to the roots of this to the Club of Rome just after the Second World War, a guy called Maurice Strong. And they, because they were so concerned about the possibilities of another world war having just come out of one, and don't forget, then we were sitting on the brink of the nuclear age with Russia and America very much at each other's throats, and Americans having their U-2 shot down over Russia and all this kind of thing. And they wanted to unite humanity under a global government, and they needed to invent a threat against which humanity could unite. And the threat they decided to invent was climate change. So the reason there's so much political weight behind this idea of carbon dioxide being the thermometer, the climate control knob, if you like, of the Earth's climate, is because the aim is political.
Yeah.
So whatever the science says, they've tried to basically fudge it to make it look like carbon dioxide is a climate control knob, and it's actually not. When you actually look over history, it's always the temperature change that occurs first before the carbon dioxide level alters. If the temperature goes up, atmospheric carbon dioxide goes up, but that's because of Henry's law. You've got all this carbon dioxide. You've got 50 times as much carbon dioxide in the oceans as in the atmosphere, and if the ocean temperatures go up, the oceans degas carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, so the atmospheric level goes up, but maintaining the correlation coefficient about 1 part of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere for every 50 parts in the ocean.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then if it goes the other way, the opposite happens. The ocean starts trying to suck carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere back into the ocean. So that's one mechanism. The problem is there's a competing mechanism as well, taking carbon dioxide permanently out of the system. And that was because about 150 million years ago, oceanic life, small oceanic organisms, started to use carbon dioxide to form basically armored skeletons, an exoskeleton to protect them, shells basically. And of course, that's a huge amount of life in the oceans, sucking carbon dioxide out in a one-way mechanism, because once those organisms die, they sink into the deep oceans, and at huge pressures down there, they get compressed into carboniferous rock. And once it's down there as carboniferous rock, it's not coming back. So it's not available for any of the atmospheric or eco processes that go on.
Yeah.
And the result of that is that we've actually seen atmospheric carbon dioxide levels go down from at the peak something like 6,000 ppm down to the current 400. And the fact that we actually started burning hydrocarbons at the start of the Industrial Revolution actually saved us from extinction, because we'd actually got down to somewhere between 250 and 200 ppm, parts per million, of atmospheric carbon dioxide. And below 170 parts per million volume, there's not enough carbon dioxide for photosynthesis to work efficiently, and plants start to die. And if plants start to die, animals die.
Yeah, exactly.
So, the people who spout all this nonsense about we can't have more carbon dioxide, it's a pollutant. It's not a pollutant. It's an essential ingredient for life on this planet.
Yeah. And
we don't husband it with the care it needs, we're threatening our own existence. And spending 30 billion on carbon capture is the height. It's insanity on stilts.
Yeah.
Especially since it won't work.
Yeah.
The technology's never been proven at scale.
Not only is it not likely to work, but it's not needed to work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as loads of people have said, we've got these really good organisms that are good at recycling carbon dioxide. They're called trees. We don't have to do anything. We just let them grow, and they will help with the recycling and interaction of interchange of carbon dioxide between the biosphere, the atmosphere. It's they're self-regulating. We just leave them, let them get on with it. We don't have to pay them anything. We don't have to subsidize them. They just do it.
Yeah, I think what we really need is we need to look at the Industrial Revolution, and then what we need to do is we need to stop blaming the Industrial Revolution for everything that's happened since. Yeah, and I think we will to call it the Industrial Revelation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I mean, if you look at the Industrial Revolution, pre-Industrial Revolution, it was essentially an agrarian society. Living standards were very low. It was pretty much subsistence. Yeah. People were living until maybe the early to mid 40s. Was that on the average?
That would be a good age. Yeah.
Yeah. But nowadays, I mean, life expectancy's been doubled. Yeah. Quality of life is improved out of all recognition. Can even, my own father and his grandfather couldn't have believe the standard of living we enjoy now. Somebody who was described as in abject poverty nowadays would be a lord, in 200 or 300 years ago.
Yeah.
And yet that's decried as being, bad. How can it be bad? It's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. But something like that we should be celebrating. We're actually being made to feel guilty about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, almost all this stuff is it's like because the approaches that the establishment uses, it's like the old buying indulgences, Catholic Church. You're all sinners. You need to beat yourself with birch twigs, hose yourself down with ice cold water, and by the way, you need to pay us some more money.
Yeah, that's
what we the politicians will stop the climate from changing. Oh yeah. Go and talk to King Canute or Canute or whatever he was called.
Yeah. And funny, isn't it? How everything that can be stopped, there's a price tag to it. So you can't drive your car into this city unless you're willing to pay another £20 a day to do so.
Yeah.
Oh, so what? That £20 a day is going to be going towards climate change? No, but an extra £20 you can park where you want.
Yeah,
nonsense.
Well, absolutely, and the problem is that they have traduced science completely to do this. I mean, all these ULEZ zones, the low emission zones, in places like Edinburgh, the air quality was already complying with the regulations before they even put the zone in.
Yeah.
So that's why you don't see any massive improvement after the zone's put in place. But what it is a massive earner for local authorities. Ching, 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 because it's all camera enforced and all the rest. And this is the problem nowadays. Technology, instead of becoming our slave, instead of being our slave, which is what it should be, it's becoming our master.
Absolutely.
And we need to take control of that back. And we need to, throw it back in the faces of the people doing this. And it's the same. It's the same with speed enforcement, because the biggest problem with speed isn't that people deliberately crash into each other in the majority of cases, but as we were talking earlier outside this meeting, road accidents that causes are generally the vast majority of road accidents. People are not paying attention; they're distracted, so they're not observing properly. As a result, they're not perceiving hazards. And they're not responding to hazards quickly enough, and then they have accidents. That's the typical road accident scenario. It's an observation, hazard perception, hazard response failure. But in the selected case of very high-speed road accidents, invariably those are committed by people who are grossly perceptually impaired by alcohol and or drugs. And you were saying earlier that there's a massive spike in drug driving.
Yep.
Compared with the past, because people know that they can't drink much alcohol, so they don't. They drink at home, but they don't perceive drug driving as the same level of problem, and they're driving around completely hopped up, coked up, whatever you want to call it, with drugs.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna do some research on this, because I think the outcome will probably be that it's a generational thing.
Yeah,
certainly.
See, I've never, because I was at the start of the drug era. I was at university, but I didn't smoke. I tried it for a couple of weeks, but if I was playing a lot of football, it affected me, capabilities. So I stopped, and I've never smoked. So I never got into spliffs, never got into recreational drugs, and certainly as a result of that, I was never going to get into anything harder than that. But the problem is now it's been legitimized, if not legalized, and loads of people seem to think it's perfectly acceptable. But it causes perceptual impairment. And then of course the other thing with high speed accidents is the people, the outright sociopathic criminal group who basically are escaping from or in a crime scene, and they don't give a hoot about who is affected as long as they can make their escape. So they don't care about speed cameras or speed enforcement, or because it doesn't really matter. And if they do catch them, well, they're already disqualified, and thrice disqualified or whatever, and not uninsured and all the rest of it. So it doesn't really affect them. It just means they get another slap over the wrist.
They're probably in a stolen vehicle anyway, so
exactly,
they can't identify them at first. Anyway.
One of the interesting things is they changed the category now, so that it's very difficult in the RAS tables, as they're called, road accident statistic tables, to tease out what proportion of serious injury accidents and fatal accidents involve stolen vehicles, whereas you used to be able to pull it out in the past. So they're actually trying to camouflage it.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I think my concern about which way society was going started with this whole thing with road safety, and I realized that actually, when you look at the statistics, the policies we're following don't actually address the core problems, the distraction, poor observation, poor hazard perception, poor hazard response, and the separate category of grossly perceptually impaired and sociopathic drivers. They need to be separated out from the rest of us who are just trying to get from A to B safely, but expeditiously, because they're a different category altogether and don't respond to the same cues, if you like.
Yeah, no,
so it's a major problem, and all that the road safety establishment does is the treatment is gradually killing the patient, but we don't have any alternatives, so we'll just keep intensifying, increasing the dose when it's evident that it's not already not working.
Yeah,
because there's more and more calls now for even lower speed limits. Because the statistics aren't coming down. Well, they're not coming down, you fools, because you're not addressing the right problems.
Speed is not the issue.
No, it's speed in the wrong place. Yeah. And the separate categories we've already identified of people who don't respond to the cues about speed limits and speed enforcement because they're not with the program, if you like, because they're drugged up or they're actually outright criminals. And they need to be treated separately.
It is a thoroughly unpleasant experience trying to drive anywhere where it's 20 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Because your focus switches from the road to the dial. Because all you're looking at all the time is how fast you're going.
And there's evidence to support the fact, the fact that people become speedometer fixated, and it actually reduces their peripheral vision. So if somebody does step out in front of them, they don't see them until too late, and they hit them at 19.9 miles an hour. Instead of actually when at a higher limit, you're actually observing what's going on. You're not spending all your time looking at the speedometer, and so you can take evasive action or brake or whatever and reduce the severity or actually avoid the accident altogether. Yeah. Now you're just a 19.9 mile per hour cruise missile, driven by a zombie cruise control crash dummy.
Yeah. It's
and the other big thing, and it applies not just to road safety but everything else. Cost benefit analysis no longer exists, because if you do a cost benefit analysis of lower speed limits, then the economic cost of lower speed limits far outweighs any advantage in terms of live sales. They always say this thing, if it saves a single life, it's worth it. Well, actually, if you've wasted billions of pounds on slowing everybody down because of the economic wasted time, that money, without those limits, could have been spent on more hospitals, on better healthcare, and actually saved a lot more lives.
Yeah.
But, stupid people don't do cost-benefit analysis. It's not on the, they have a one-dimensional view of how things should be done. It's this, we know we must command and control, you must obey.
Have you ever thought of running for as an MP?
I did.
Yeah.
But it was essentially when Blair had been the Sedgefield MP.
Yeah.
I stood against the existing Labour. I mean, basically you could put the proverbial monkey suit man in at Sedgefield, and at one time he would have got in as a Labour candidate,
Yeah.
In Hartlepool, which is not that far away, the guy called Hangus the Monkey actually got in a monkey suit with a Labour rosette, of course. And it was a protest vote against that, and I stood for UKIP.
Excellent.
I managed to retain my deposit, which was I felt was a badge of honour. But I decided, no, it's not for me. And certainly London is not one of my favourite places. I go there under sufferance. Yeah. I now no longer feel that it's actually, it is in the country in which I was born, but no longer part of the country in which I was born. It's a separate.
I know exactly what you mean.
Ecosystem altogether, from which I feel completely alienated.
Yeah, I totally agree. My daughter lives in Kilburn, and it's got a great high street, loads of big name shops, loads of interesting little boutique shops, a proliferation of food establishments that are mostly geared up to the population there now, and walking through Kilburn, you could be in another country.
Yes, yeah.
You don't hear many English voices.
No, I started to feel that many years ago when I was still working as a chemical industry salesperson. I driving through places like Edgbaston, even at that time, it's a long time ago. I thought, wow, this doesn't really feel like UK anymore. There's hardly any white people. You know, there was hardly anybody of Caucasian skin tone, if you like. And I thought, it doesn't represent the diversity, the country as a whole. And I feel even more so that with the major cities, London, Birmingham, Manchester, probably even haven't been back to Manchester for many years. And you just feel divorced from the place itself and from the people who populate it, and certainly from the political elite that inhabits that ecosystem, if you like, because they don't seem to be connected to the outer reaches of the country where the vast majority of people live. I mean, what's the population in Greater London? 10, 11 million?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And there's 70 odd million of us now. And I know there's other big urban centers, but the vast majority of the population of this country live outside of major urban centers by choice in many cases. Certainly that's my choice. And they don't feel connected to the major urban centers, other than that we're all occupying the same geographical region, if you like, but not the same political, not the same philosophical, not the same sociological, not the same ethical or moral universe.
And this is the whole argument against people that are arriving here on boats as well, isn't it? Because these people don't share our way of life.
No.
As far as we know,
they don't want to share it. I mean, this idea that they will integrate is well, it's been shown. If you get too large numbers in too short a time, then you just create ghettos effectively that don't integrate with the rest of society. And as you say, we don't know. These people coming from over on the boats are predominantly young men of working age, of military.
They say the term that's often thrown out there is of fighting age.
Yes, yeah,
it's quite a threatening statement, but that's how they're labelled, isn't it?
They're not, and certainly the number of women, and there are obviously some women come across and some children, but they are only a small proportion, a very small proportion of the number of people who are coming across. And last year, I mean, the figure was something horrendous, like 1 million. But this year, they're crowing that it's down to 171,000. And that's the difference between people leaving and people coming in. And when you realize there's over 500,000 per annum native Brits leaving this country and not coming back.
And a lot of those being business people that are taking their business out of the country, or young people who are disenfranchised because they're not being given the same sort of support as people that are arriving here from nowhere without a passport.
Yeah, we're putting them in 4-star hotels and all the rest of it.
So what would you, I mean, honestly, Brian, if I was in my 20s and I was thinking, well, I've not got much of a future here, I'd be looking elsewhere. I really would. So I don't blame them at all. But everything gets massaged. The figures are massaged. Oh, look, we're down on the number of people. No, we're not. We're down on the number of people that should be here going because they're not felt welcome here anymore.
Yeah, in their own country. Yeah. Anyway, let's. I mean, I think we've covered that.
There you go. That was our rant.
I mean, I think the other thing is, the festering Iran-US situation in the Persian Gulf. There's quite a bit of stuff in this digest about that. Basically, what you've got to realize is that the Persian Gulf carries about 20% of the oil and gas through that corridor that's needed by Western Europe to sustain its energy system. because, you know, we, much as Mr. Miliband might rant on about renewables, we've passed the tipping point now. The more renewables we bring into our grid, the more unstable our grid becomes, because the renewables are not, they don't create grid inertia. And anybody wants to understand that needs to Google Catherine Porter and listen to the recent podcast she did on grid inertia. And essentially, the more renewables we put in, they produce direct current to get the same level of input into the grid from renewable sources like solar arrays and wind farms. You need a lot more grid connections because they're low grid intensity. So you need, you know, hundreds of connections where you need one to a conventional nuclear or gas-fired power station, right? So you've got multiple connection points to match the capability of a single generating site like a nuclear or gas-fired power station. And most of them are stuck up in the Orkneys or somewhere stupid like that, where actually, you know, they don't work efficiently because there isn't enough solar radiation or wind. Well, the wind comes and goes. You are destabilizing our grid. And Catherine Porter is already warning that the two main conventional stations in Scotland, if and when they go offline, and they're slated to go offline very soon, the Scottish grid will be on the point of collapse nearly the whole time. And of course, if the Scottish grid collapses, that has implications for the rest of the country as well. And she is saying that, you know, we will be having power outages on a regular basis. And you can't build even a new gas-fired power station nowadays in less than 7 or 8 years, because that's the waiting list for new turbines.
Yeah. And where do those turbines come from?
Not from the UK anymore.
Exactly. This goes
South Korea or somewhere, I think, now is one of the large producers. And they're also one of the large producers of off-the-shelf nuclear reactors.
Yeah. This goes back to the Catherine McBride interview that we've just done.
Yeah,
where we were talking about this virtue signaling of, oh, look at us, we're not doing this, we're not doing that. Well, we're actually importing it from elsewhere. So
and produce less environmentally sympathetically than we would do it.
Exactly.
At higher cost.
Yeah. So all we're doing is exporting the problem and then importing it back again, even if it is a problem, and importing it back again at, like you say, a higher cost and done dirtier, if you like.
Yeah, and getting rid of lots of British workers, particularly up in the north, in the northeast, in Scotland, Aberdeen, and you know, the oil industry has been decimated by this lunatic government. There's no other way to describe it. It's economic vandalism and lunacy.
It is. And to what end? What is their want? What do they want?
They want us all back in skins, living in caves, eating grass or whatever we used to eat. You know, want us back as hunter gatherers. It's the very antithesis of modern life. And that's the other thing. Even if we stop producing any hydrocarbons or extracting any hydrocarbons, where are we going to get all the medical plastics, all the antibiotics, all the fertilizers that come from the hydrocarbon extraction and processing industry on which we all depend? 6,000 or so products only can be derived from hydrocarbons. You can't produce them using renewable energy because it's not reliable. So you still need hydrocarbons for all the downstream products and for the stable, reliable energy generation that hydrocarbons and nuclear can provide.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and every technological advance was an advance. Everything felt as if it was an improvement to our lives.
Yeah.
And you touched on it a little bit ago, Brian, that we've stopped using technology as being its master, and it has now become the master of us.
Yes.
And that has very much been the tipping point. And that's only going to get worse with the advent and increase in use of AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've lost countless jobs as a result of the internet, but also it it gave jobs. I mean, it gave the ability for small businesses to start and thrive online, which is fine. That's great. But I think AI is going to cause so many problems with certainly generational mental health. I think one of the biggest problems that we've got these days is that kids that are sort of like teenagers to mid-20s, even early 30s now, they've been brought up very differently than what you and I were. And the constant barrage of misleading information that they are targeted with. When I was a kid, I learned to read through newspapers. My mum and dad told me this. You said, you know, we'd give you kids' books, but you would be looking at newspapers and reading newspapers. Well, there you go. They're a bit quirky, but still, there you go. The beauty of reading a newspaper, as opposed to getting your news online, is that a newspaper isn't as targeted. Yes, different newspapers have different agendas, but you can go through a newspaper and you'll pick up a story on sport, you'll pick up a story on the environment, you'll pick up a story on all sorts of things that are going on in your local area, blah, blah, blah. Algorithms online these days, they pigeonhole people and they just feed them the information that they think that they want to see, and don't give them a broader view. And once they've shown an interest in something specific, their channel is down that route and they're bombarded with nonsense. And this is what's led to all sorts of weird cultural diversifications, if you like, within our own society, where we've got kids today that are so confused, they don't know whether they're male, female, the dog, cat, or a mouse. They haven't got a clue. So technology, to me, I loved the 80s and the 90s. It was fantastic. It was a fantastic time to be around. Even my son, who has become a massive Oasis fan, he's 22, but he says, I wish I was alive in the 90s. I said, so do I, Matthew, because you've had a much better time than you're having now, mate.
I would struggle with that because as a Liverpool supporter, the Gallagher brothers are your Oasis, aren't they? And they're both, is it Manchester?
Yes, they are, but Matthew's also a massive Liverpool fan as well.
Oh,
He's not all bad.
Conflicting priorities there. Anyway, it's really bad. And I mean, I started foreseeing this a long time ago. Everybody thought there was going to be a peace dividend from perestroika, you know, when the wall came down. And maybe I was a sort of embryonic conspiracy theorist then, because it struck me that now you've got a massive world arms industry that's geared to protect us from the Soviet menace. What's it going to protect us from now? And the answer is it's going to protect us from ourselves. And that's what's progressively been happening. All of this technology that was protecting us from this evil threat from the East is now being used to cow us and wear us down, because they're protecting us from ourselves, because they don't think we're capable of doing that ourselves. And I feel, I resent it strongly when the state thinks it knows how to protect me better than I do. Basically, because most politicians are pig ignorant, and the civil servants who support them all read art subjects and don't know their bottoms from their elbows in terms of science and statistics and things like that. So you can feed them any old load of unscientific rubbish and they won't know that from gospel, because they can't take rational, scientifically literate decisions. And I think that's a huge threat. And it's a huge threat to humanity. And coming back to what we were talking about, AI, apparently one of the founders of AI has now recanted and said, we need to get control of this process, so it could end up controlling us rather than us controlling it. And surely, have these guys never watched the Terminator films? God's sake, Cyberdyne systems,
Yeah, that quite often gets quoted amongst people that I hang around with.
Absolutely. And it's true. If you don't take control of AI, it will take control of us, and it will sharp decide that we're the grit in the gears.
Yeah.
You know?
There's something even more sort of disturbing than Terminator. Have you ever seen the film AI, Artificial Intelligence, which at the core of it, it starts with like a robotic child that's brought in to help a family that couldn't have kids.
Yeah,
and then they do have a child of their own, and this robot kid kills this kid. And the robot kid then goes through various sort of generational sort of advances, and becomes frozen and defrosted by what the world turns into, which is run by robots, and is the closest to humanity that we've got left, and is a robot. So that's a pretty depressing future to be thinking about.
Yeah. There was a lot. My wife started watching this series, Black Mirror.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. But there's some. I mean, there was one she described. I thought, I'm not watching this series, about a woman who had a brain tumor, and they created an artificial brain and filled it full of all their memories and all the rest of it. But it was a paid subscription model, and of course the subs kept going up and up and up, and they couldn't afford to pay, so they basically downgraded the model to the point where she couldn't function anymore, and they couldn't afford to pay. And in the end, they turned her off, and she, died. But this is what is happening now with automotive technology, is actually mirroring what's going on there, because modern vehicles now, many of them, you're buying access to a mobility system. You're not just buying a car. And it's weighed down with all sorts of software programs and things, so that if you need to change a headlight, the only person that can do it is the dealer, because it's all coded into the software system of the vehicle. And you're looking at like £3,000 to change a headlight, whereas you used to go down to Halfords, it was $15.99, 20 minute work. Now it's the main dealer job. The car has to be reprogrammed to accept a new headlight. And then there's all the other systems, the surveillance systems they're starting to build in now. The latest ones are going to have all these cameras to check whether he's still awake. What happens when you put your mirrored lens glasses on and what does it do then? Does it just stop you from using the car altogether?
I think you've even been talking about going back a couple of years in terms of
absolutely, I'm with my current vehicle, because I didn't realize when I bought it, it's got some of this stuff, not all of it, but some of it built in. And apparently the sweet spot you need is around 2000 to 2010, right? Which is before, it still had loads of the knobs and
all
switches,
your bells and whistles.
Very few touch screens. Just paid a sort of a nod to touch screens without actually the touch screen dominating the car. In fact, I saw one of the adverts it's on, I think it's a Geely or something it's on, and this touch screen is like that. It's like enormous. And if the touch screen goes wrong, you're knackered, because everything works through the touch screen.
Well, I mean, we've got a review on the one of the Geely models in our next magazine, and the inside of the cabin shot, if you like, it's like a huge computer. It's like a laptop.
Well, and the latest thing that's coming out of China apparently is the Chinese now consider electric cars like iPhones. Right, so they're cheap in China. Obviously, they're manufactured there using coal and also the sort of dirty energy that we've dispensed with, and as a result, very cheap. Actually, in fairness to China now, they're using a lot of reactors that use supercritical combustion. So the emissions, the dangerous emissions, are actually very low and very efficient. But it's coal nonetheless that we've decided we can't afford to use, because we can't afford the technology to use it efficiently. But the result is that the Chinese drivers now, they keep the car until the next model turns up that's got even more bells and whistles than the previous one. But there's no secondhand market for used EVs in China. So these things are going, and they're literally piling up in places and being landfilled because they can't recycle them. So in effect, the cars that you are buying now from the Chinese, or indeed from a lot of the European manufacturers, are the equivalent of an iPhone on wheels, and they will be trying to upgrade you to the next model. But the problem is, you're looking at 50 or 60 grand to buy one of these things. Whereas with the conventional thing, all right, you wear the engine out, just buy a new engine, re-engine it. You can't do that with one of these things. Once it gets to a certain stage, the battery's junk, the car's junk.
They're trying to push us into a way of thinking where nobody actually owns a vehicle anymore.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the same as is going on with property as well, because lots of big equity groups like BlackRock are buying up private housing in America and in this country to deprive future potential buyers of real estate they can buy, and they're renting this stuff out, so that in effect their model is you all live in a rented flat in a high-rise, high population density center, essentially like a Blade Runner society. We're all just like bees in a hive. And that's their view of the future, because the people are controlled if they're cowed and concentrated together, and can be locked down easily and all the rest of it.
The big problem that I have with that is, I mean, I own my property.
Likewise.
If people choose to rent, they choose to rent. That's up to them. But for me, when you get to retirement, if you're still paying rent, that's a huge chunk of your pension.
Yeah.
For me, I always wanted to own my own property before I got to.
Exactly. Well, it's like the old adage: pay down debt.
Yeah.
And once I started saving for ISAs, I got to the point where I could pay off my mortgage with the money I've accumulated in ISA, and that was the first thing I did.
Yeah.
And then you own your property, but now they're trying to make it so that owning property is theft. Again, Marxo-fascist principle.
Yeah, it's mad.
And so they want, this government is embarking on, and it's happening in Europe as well, where they're trying to stick people for notional capital gains on property, because the property is appreciating in value. And so they say, well, actually, you own an asset that's worth this amount of money. And once death duties are incurred, when you try to pass it down, they take a huge chunk in death duties that mean you can't hang on to the property and you have to sell it. And then, of course, BlackRock or somebody buys it, not a private buyer.
Yeah.
So, there's an awful lot that's going on that's very, very dodgy, that needs to be stamped on. The only way I can describe it.
Definitely.
The best way to get the Marxo-fascist boot off your neck is to get rid of them and bring people back who believe in libertarianism. End of.
Yeah. And I think at that point, it ought to be the end of the show.
I think we've communicated over a lot of issues there, and we haven't scratched the surface with some of this stuff. But
well, what I will do is I'll put this news digest out to the members and also to the press.
Just before, the one thing we didn't before we go, let's the Ferrari Luce.
Oh right, yes.
Is the Prancing Horse's new model? It's their first battery electric vehicle. So it's I think it's a hybrid, actually. I think it does have a petrol engine in it. But you would have thought, after the furore with the Jaguar, whatever it was called, which they didn't actually show in the advert, they just showed you a lot of very strange people prancing about doing very strange things. But when it was actually shown to people who might actually buy a Jaguar, they universally balked, maybe even threw up. I don't know. I wasn't watching them at the time, but it was pilloried for not respecting Jaguar's heritage. Well, Ferrari have done the same with the Luce, and former Ferrari CEOs and whatnot said, I hope they don't put the Prancing Horse badge on this car. And the most damning criticism was it actually looked like a £32,000 Nissan Leaf, latest incarnation, and you can go and find the videos where they actually compare them, and they do it slides along and goes from one to the other, and you struggle to differentiate between the two. One costs 550,000 euros and the other costs 40,000 euros or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's you would think that after all the go woke, go broke warnings that they've given to car manufacturers, that Ferrari would have paid attention to that.
You would.
And their attitude seems to be, well, we'll hang it out there and you'll get used to it.
Yeah, I did slightly different, I suppose, but I drove past one of those new electric Capris the other day. I mean, not only does it not look like a Capri, but who, in their right mind, who is a fan of the dear old Ford Capri, would want an electric version? I've got a good friend of mine who buys and restores Capris, and he just laughed when he saw this thing.
Yeah. Well, two of my oldest friends, one had a 2-litre S Capri, the other had a 3-litre S Capri, and they were interesting cars to drive, shall I say? A bit leery at times.
Oh yeah, but that was part of the fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, and but the idea of something that looks like something designed in a Tonka toy designer's nightmare, comparing that with the old Capri, it does not compute.
No. There's somebody out there with big kahunas that thinks we'll get away with this. No. Anyway, my friend, I think we'll
better go because we've overstayed our welcome, I suppose. Certainly, as far as the Greens are concerned, they're probably sort of, getting those little dolls and sticking pins in them.
I wonder what that pain in my side was.
Right then. All right. Catch you later.
Cheers.